Welcome to Peacetime Story, your cozy space for calm and relaxation. Tonight's tale is here to help you unwind, let go of the day, and drift into peaceful rest. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Share it in the comments below, and let's see how far our story family reaches. And if you enjoy gentle bedtime stories, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more peaceful nights. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's journey. Chapter 1, Shadows over Meadowbank. In the verdant expanse of the English countryside, where the serpentine curves of the River Thames wove through lush meadows like a silver ribbon adorning a verdant gown, there stood the imposing edifice of Meadowbank Manor. The year was 1935, a time when the scars of the Great War still etched deep furrows into the collective psyche of the nation, and the glittering veneer of aristocratic life concealed the insidious creep of financial decay and unspoken animosities. The manor itself, a Georgian masterpiece of honey-hued stone and symmetrical grace, rose majestically amid manicured lawns and ancient oaks that whispered secrets to the gathering dusk. Ivy clung tenaciously to its walls, as if nature itself sought to reclaim the hubris of man. On this sultry summer evening, the air hung heavy with the promise of a storm, the distant rumble of thunder serving as a portentous overture to the drama about to unfold. Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective, whose reputation for unraveling the most labyrinthine enigmas preceded him like a herald's fanfare, had arrived at Meadowbank at the behest of his old acquaintance, Colonel Archibald Meadowbank. Poirot, with his diminutive stature, egg-shaped cranium, and meticulously waxed moustache that curled with Gallic precision, cut a figure of fastidious elegance amid the rustic opulence. His patent leather shoes gleamed with an almost obsessive polish, and his cat-like green eyes, sharp as the finest stiletto, missed naught in their vigilant sweep of the surroundings. Accompanying him was Captain Arthur Hastings, a stalwart Englishman of military bearing, his honest face framed by a neatly trimmed moustache, his demeanour one of unwavering loyalty tempered by a certain ingenuous simplicity. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings remarked as they alighted from the chauffeured motor car. "This place has an air about it, grand, yet somehow foreboding." "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a melodious blend of Belgian inflection and unerring insight. "The human soul. It reveals itself in the architecture of its abodes. Here, one detects the undercurrents, the tensions that simmer beneath the surface, like a pot au feu left too long on the flame." The colonel himself greeted them at the grand portico, his robust frame clad in a tweed suite that bespoke his retired military status. Colonel Archibald Meadowbank was a man in his late 60s, his ruddy complexion a testament to years under the Indian sun, his white moustache bristling with authoritative vigour. Yet, beneath this bluff exterior, lurked a psyche marred by profound loss. The death of his only son in the trenches of Flanders had left an indelible void, compounded by the erosion of his once vast fortune through imprudent speculations in the volatile markets of the post-war era. "Poirot, Hastings, delighted you could make it," he boomed, his handshake firm, but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Come in. The others are assembled in the drawing room. A small soiree, nothing extravagant, but one must keep up appearances, eh?" As they entered the manor's cavernous hall, adorned with portraits of stern ancestors gazing down with judgmental eyes, Poirot's keen senses absorbed the atmosphere. The air was redolent with the polish of beeswax on oak panelling, mingled with the faint, acrid hint of cigar smoke wafting from an adjoining room. Crystal chandeliers suspended from the coffered ceiling cast prismatic rainbows across the marble floors, illuminating the gathering with a deceptive warmth. The drawing room was a symphony of refined luxury. Velvet drapes in deep crimson framed tall sash windows overlooking the gardens, where topiaries stood like silent guardians under the gathering clouds. A grand piano occupied one corner, its ivory keys untouched, while a roaring fire in the Adam fireplace warded off the evening chill. The assembled guests turned as Poirot and Hastings entered, their conversations halting like a gramophone needle lifted mid-melody. First among them was Lady Evelyn Meadowbank, the Colonel's second wife, a woman of striking beauty in her mid-40s. Her porcelain skin glowed under the chandelier's light, her raven hair arranged in an elaborate chignon that accentuated the graceful curve of her neck. Clad in a gown of sapphire silk that matched her piercing eyes, she moved with the languid poise of one born to privilege. Yet, Poirot discerned in her demeanour a psychological underlayer of restrained ambition, a simmering discontent with her husband's frugality, which confined her to a life of genteel restraint rather than the lavish excesses she craved. Her motive, though unspoken, hovered like a spectre. The Colonel's estate, if inherited unencumbered, would liberate her from this matrimonial bondage. Lounging by the fireplace was Major Reginald Forbes, the Colonel's brother-in-law through his first marriage. A man in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair swept back in a dashing wave and a rakish scar traversing his left cheek. A souvenir from the Boer War. He exuded the charm of a seasoned adventurer. His eyes, restless and calculating, betrayed a gambler's soul, perpetually chasing the thrill of the wager. Psychologically, Forbes was a study in desperation. Addicted to the roulette wheel and the turf, his fortunes had ebbed to the point of ruin, his motive crystalline. The Colonel's wealth could settle his mounting debts and restore his profligate lifestyle. Miss Clara Voss, the Colonel's young secretary, fluttered about with a sheaf of papers, her golden curls bouncing with youthful energy. At 28, she possessed a pert nose dusted with freckles and wide hazel eyes that feigned innocence. Her attire, a modest blouse and skirt, belied a vengeful spirit forged in the fires of personal grievance. Poirot noted the subtle tension in her posture, a psychological profile revealing deep-seated resentment. Whispers of unrequited affections and familial secrets tied to the Colonel's past indiscretions provided her with a motive steeped in revenge. Dr. Julian Thorpe, the family physician, stood aloof by a bookcase, his lean frame accentuated by a tailored suit. In his early 50s, with wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a high forehead and a gaze as incisive as a scalpel, he embodied clinical detachment. Yet beneath this veneer lurked a grudge nursed over years, a professional slight inflicted by the Colonel during a long-ago medical consultation that had tarnished Thorpe's reputation. His motive was one of quiet retribution, the desire to excise the source of his lingering humiliation. Completing the ensemble was Mr. Victor Lang, a business associate of the Colonel's, a swarthy gentleman in his 40s with oiled black hair and shrewd, coal-dark eyes that missed little. His smile was that of a merchant sealing a deal, but his psyche was mercenary to the core. A disputed partnership with the Colonel, fraught with accusations of sharp practices, fueled a motive of financial gain. Removing the obstacle would secure his claim to lucrative ventures. Dinner was announced, and the party adjourned to the dining room, where candlelight danced upon silverware and crystal goblets. Conversation flowed like the vintage claret, superficially amiable, yet laced with undercurrents of tension. The colonel regaled with tales of imperial glory, but Poirot observed the glances exchanged. Lady Evelyn's subtle sighs, Forbes's forced laughter, Voss's averted eyes, Thorpe's tight-lipped smiles, Lang's calculating nods. As the meal concluded, the storm erupted with symphonic fury, rain lashing the windows like accusatory fingers. The colonel excused himself to his study, a sanctum of leather-bound volumes, exotic trophies, and a massive oak desk, to attend to correspondence. "Won't be long," he assured, his voice hearty but strained. Hours passed in desultory games of bridge and billiards. Midnight approached when Hastings, seeking a volume on military history from the study, knocked upon the door. Receiving no response, he tried the handle, locked. Alarmed, he summoned the butler, who fetched a spare key. The door swung open to reveal a scene of horror. Colonel Meadowbank sprawled across his desk, his white shirt front stained crimson, multiple stab wounds marring his torso. Blood pooled upon the Persian rug in viscous rivulets, the metallic tang mingling with the storm's ozone. Clutched in his rigid hand was an antique Indian dagger from his collection, its blade wiped haphazardly, but still bearing traces of gore. A torn scrap of fabric, silk perhaps, clung to the desk's edge, an enigmatic clue amid the carnage. Poirot, summoned forthwith, surveyed the tableau with methodical precision. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his moustache quivering. "The brutality, it speaks of passion unbridled. Yet the door locked, the window secured. Hastings, we have a puzzle most intriguing. The little grey cells, they awaken." The storm raged on, but within Meadowbank Manor, a tempest of suspicion had only just begun to brew. Chapter 2. The Labyrinth of Alibis. The first tentative rays of the morning sun filtered through the leaded windows of Meadowbank Manor, casting a pallid luminescence over the estate that did little to dispel the pall of tragedy which had descended upon it like a shroud. The storm of the previous night had abated, leaving in its wake a world washed clean yet somehow more foreboding, the manicured lawns sodden, the ancient oaks dripping with residual moisture, and the River Thames beyond swollen and murmuring with discontent. Within the manor, the atmosphere was thick with the residue of horror. Servants moved like spectres through the corridors, their whispers a susurrus of speculation, while the guests, now suspects in a tableau of murder, awoke to the grim reality that one among them had wielded the fatal blade. Hercule Poirot, having retired but briefly to his guest chamber for a repose that was more contemplative than restful, emerged impeccably attired in a morning suit of dove-grey wool, his moustache a paragon of symmetry, his green eyes alight with the fervour of intellectual pursuit. He descended the grand staircase with the measured tread of a man for whom haste was anathema, meeting Captain Hastings in the hall. The good captain, his face etched with the lines of a sleepless night, adjusted his tie with a nervous gesture. "Poirot, this business, it's beastly. The colonel stabbed like that. Who could have done such a thing?" "Patience, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice a soothing cadence amid the turmoil. "The human mind, it constructs edifices of deception, but the little grey cells, they dismantle them brick by brick. We shall commence with the scene of the crime. Order and method, these are our allies." The study, now cordoned by the local constabulary, who had arrived in the small hours, presented a scene of macabre stillness. The colonel's body had been removed to the morgue, but the desk bore the indelible stains of violence. Crimson blotches upon the blotter, the antique Indian dagger, its hilt inlaid with ivory and gemstones, lay where it had fallen, wiped in a perfunctory manner that suggested haste rather than thoroughness. Poirot, donning a pair of kid gloves with ritualistic care, circled the room like a feline assessing its territory. Observe Hastings, the French windows. They give onto the terrace, and thence to the gardens. The latch is secure, yet see here, faint smudges of mud upon the sill, and footprints in the softened earth outside, leading toward the arboretum. Hastings knelt to examine them. By Jove, Poirot, a man's boot, size 10 perhaps, leading away from the house. Could it be the killer escaped that way? Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. Too conspicuous, no? In a storm such as last night's, footprints would blur, yet these are distinct, almost deliberately so. A misdirection, perhaps, to suggest an intruder from without, and the door locked from within, as you noted. The key was in the Colonel's pocket. How, then, did the assassin enter and exit? Unless... but we shall see. Further scrutiny revealed additional enigmas. A bloodied cufflink, monogrammed with the initials RF, nestled beneath the desk as if dislodged in a struggle. A timeline fraught with inconsistencies. The Colonel's pocket watch stopped at 10:15, yet witnesses placed him alive at 10:30. And a faint scent of tobacco, not the Colonel's preferred blend, lingering in the air. Psychological clues, Hastings, Poirot murmured. The killer's mind, it betrays itself in these small negligences. With the preliminaries concluded, Poirot requested that the interviews be conducted in the library, a vast chamber of towering shelves laden with tomes on history, warfare, and exotic travels, the air redolent with the musty perfume of aged leather. A long mahogany table served as the locus, with Poirot at its head, notebook in hand, his expression one of benign inquisitiveness that masked the rapier sharpness of his intellect. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, summoned by telegram and arriving with his customary bluff efficiency, joined them, his bowler hat perched at a jaunty angle. "Right then, Poirot," he grunted. "Let's have at 'em. Bloody business, this. Multiple stabs suggest rage, not robbery." The suspects were summoned one by one, each entering with the wariness of a gazelle approaching a watering hole teeming with predators. First came Lady Evelyn Meadowbank, her sapphire eyes shadowed by the veil of a mourning bonnet, her gown of black crepe whispering against the floorboards. She seated herself with the grace of a duchess, though Poirot noted the subtle tremor in her hands, a psychological telltale of inner turmoil. "This is a dreadful ordeal," she intoned, her voice modulated to convey genteel distress. "Archibald and I, we had our differences, as all couples do. He was parsimonious, accusing me of extravagance with the household accounts. We quarrelled mildly last evening, but nothing untoward. I retired early with a migraine. The storm, you see, exacerbates them." Her motive, Poirot discerned, lay in the promise of inheritance, yet her alibi, corroborated by her maid who had brought her a tisane at 10, seemed ironclad. A red herring, perhaps, or genuine. "Major," Reginald Forbes followed, his rakish scar pale against his flushed cheeks, a cigarette dangling from his lips with affected nonchalance. He lounged in the chair, his restless eyes flitting about the room like a gambler assessing odds. "Look here, Poirot," he said, his tone bluff but laced with desperation. "The old boy and I had words. He lent me a spot of cash for the tables, but threatened to cut me off. Said I was a drain on the family coffers. But stab him? Preposterous. I was in the billiard room till midnight, potting balls with Lang. Psychologically, Forbes was a vortex of compulsion, his addiction a motive writ large. The cufflink bore his initials, a damning clue, or a plant to misdirect. Miss Clara Voss entered next, her golden curls dishevelled, her freckled cheeks streaked with what appeared to be genuine tears. She clutched a handkerchief, her hazel eyes wide with feigned innocence that Poirot's acuity pierced like a lancet. The Colonel was my employer, kind in his way, she faltered, but secretive. I managed his correspondence, and lately there were irregularities in his affairs. I overheard him arguing with Mr. Lang about shares, something about forgery. As for me, I was in my room, typing letters till late. Her vengeful psyche rooted in whispers of a familial slight. The Colonel had once dismissed her mother from service under dubious circumstances, provided a motive of retribution. A tear in her sleeve matched the scrap at the scene, a potential red herring. Dr. Julian Thorpe, composed behind his wire-rimmed spectacles, adjusted them with clinical precision as he sat. His high forehead furrowed slightly, betraying the analytical mind at work. As the family physician, I examined the body preliminarily, he stated coolly. Death resulted from exsanguination, due to multiple stab wounds, inflicted with considerable force, suggesting emotional impetus. I was in my guest chamber, reviewing medical journals. No, I harboured no ill will, though years ago the Colonel questioned my diagnosis in a matter concerning his late son, a slight, but forgotten. His grudge, Poirot noted, festered like a chronic ailment. A timeline inconsistency arose. A footman had glimpsed him near the study at 10:45, contradicting his claim. Finally, Mr. Victor Lang, his oiled hair gleaming under the library lamps, entered with the smooth assurance of a merchant closing a deal. His shrewd black eyes met Poirot's without flinching, though a subtle tick at the corner of his mouth hinted at calculation. Business with the Colonel was contentious, he admitted silkily. A partnership gone awry. He accused me of sharp practices in our joint ventures. We discussed it briefly after dinner, but parted amicably. I played billiards with Forbes thereafter. His mercenary psyche, driven by avarice, positioned him as a suspect, yet his alibi intertwined with Forbes's, a mutual shield, or collusion. As the interviews concluded, Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Mes amis," he said to Hastings and Japp, "the alibis, they form a labyrinth, intricate and deceptive. The cufflink implicates Forbes, yet feels contrived. The timelines clash like ill-matched gears, and the psychological undercurrents, ambition, desperation, vengeance, humiliation, greed, they swirl like eddies in the Thames. But fear not, the little grey cells, they shall navigate this maze." Outside the sun climbed higher, but within Meadowbank Manor, the shadows of suspicion lengthened, ensnaring all in their inexorable grasp. Chapter 3. Ghosts of accusation. Several days had transpired since the sanguinary discovery in the study of Meadowbank Manor, and the once imposing estate now seemed to languish under an invisible pall, its grandeur eroded by the relentless tide of suspicion. The Georgian facade, with its symmetrical windows and ivy-veiled stonework, appeared almost melancholic in the intermittent sunlight that pierced the lingering clouds, as if the very architecture mourned the loss of its master. The gardens, erstwhile paragons of horticultural precision, now bore the scars of investigative trampling. Flower beds dishevelled, pathways muddied by the comings and goings of constables. Along the banks of the River Thames, the waters flowed with indifferent serenity, a stark contrast to the turbulent undercurrents of human emotion swirling within the manor's walls, Whispers among the servants had escalated to fervent conjectures, each glance exchanged in the corridors laden with the weight of unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, had taken refuge in the conservatory, a glass-domed sanctuary teeming with exotic orchids and ferns, remnants of the colonel's imperial sojourns in the Orient. The air here was humid and fragrant, redolent of moist earth and blooming petals, providing a verdant counterpoint to the macabre proceedings. Poirot reclined in a wicker chair, his egg-shaped head tilted thoughtfully, his moustache a sentinel of waxed perfection. Before him lay an array of notes, scribbled in his precise script, alongside the enigmatic cufflink and the torn fabric scrap. "Ah, Hastings," he intoned as his companion entered, bearing a tray of tea. The psychological patterns, they emerged like motifs in a tapestry. Observe, the lady's grief, so artfully feigned, conceals a steely resolve. The major's bravado masks a quivering fear, like a gambler bluffing with an empty hand. Hastings, his military bearing somewhat diminished by the strain of the investigation, poured the tea with a steady hand. "Quite so, Poirot. But these clues, they tantalize yet elude. The footprints outside the study, for instance. Inspector Japp is convinced they point to an external intruder, but you demur." Poirot sipped his tisane, chamomile for the nerves, with delicate appreciation. "Précisément. The footprints, they match Dr. Thorpe's boots in size and tread, leading to the garden shed where poisons are stored, arsenic, strychnine, relics of the colonel's campaigns against vermin. A red herring most exquisite, non? For the colonel was stabbed, not poisoned. Someone plants this trail to misdirect, to suggest a medical man's involvement in a subtler demise. And the timeline, it deepens the enigma. Miss Voss claims to have heard a muffled cry at 11 o'clock, yet the butler's hall clock, wound faithfully each evening, registered 10:30 when he passed by. The investigation pressed onward with inexorable momentum. Poirot, accompanied by Japp and Hastings, reconvened the suspects for further interrogations, this time in the morning room. A sunlit space adorned with chintz sofas and pastoral watercolours, its cheerfulness an ironic foil to the grim discourse. The air carried the faint scent of lavender from sachets tucked among the cushions, a futile attempt to dispel the odour of deceit. Lady Evelyn Meadowbank was summoned first, her morning attire a study in elegant restraint, black lace veiling her sapphire eyes, her porcelain hands clasped in her lap. Poirot's gaze, keen as a falcon's, noted the nervous fingering of her pearl necklace, a tick betraying inner agitation. "Madam," he began, his voice a velvet probe, "we have uncovered a document of import, a codicil to the colonel's will, drafted but weeks ago, which diminishes your inheritance considerably, favouring instead a charitable trust for war veterans. You professed ignorance, yet your demeanour, it suggests otherwise. The motive crystallises, financial liberation from a union grown burdensome." Lady Evelyn's composure fractured momentarily, her eyes flashing with indignation. "How dare you insinuate such vulgarity? Archibald mentioned revisions, yes, but I knew naught of the details. My migraine that night, it confined me to my chamber. Ask the maid, she attended me." Yet her psychological profile, as Poirot dissected it, revealed layers of ambition suppressed. A woman of refined tastes, chafing against her husband's parsimony, her feigned ignorance a shield against scrutiny. Major Reginald Forbes entered next, his silver-streaked hair disarrayed, his scar a livid streak against pallid skin. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, exhaling a plume of smoke that curled like a question mark. "Poirot, this is infernal," he blustered, though his voice carried a quaver. "I've nothing to hide. Yes, I quarrelled with Archie. Debts mounting. You know the drill. He threatened to disown me entirely. But I have an alibi. The billiard room with Lang, as I said." Poirot leaned forward, producing a made statement. "Yet the witness you proffered, the scullery girl, she recants, admitting to a bribe of £10. Desperate measures, Major, for a man ensnared by the dice." Forbes's psyche unravelled before them. A gambler's desperation, where risk begat ruin. His bravado a crumbling facade. Miss Clara Voss followed, her golden curls pinned severely, her freckled cheeks flushed with emotion. She seated herself with a defiant air, her hazel eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "You pry into matters best left buried," she said, her voice a whisper of venom. "The Colonel, he was no saint. My mother served here years ago, dismissed in disgrace after an indiscretion. He fathered a child, my half-sibling, abandoned to an orphanage. Revenge. Perhaps it simmered, but I did not strike the blow." Poirot noted the bitter gaze, a psychological clue etched in her features. Vengeance as a slow-burning ember, fueled by familial betrayal. The torn fabric from her sleeve matched the scrap, a damning link, or a clever frame. Dr. Julian Thorpe, his wire-rimmed spectacles reflecting the morning light, entered with clinical poise, though his high forehead beaded with perspiration. "Gentlemen," he said coolly, "I harbour no illusions about the Colonel's character. Years ago, he impugned my professional judgment. A misdiagnosis of his son's ailment, he claimed, though it was influenza beyond remedy. It cost me patience, reputation. A grudge, admitted. But murder? I am a healer, not a destroyer." His motive, Poirot discerned, was one of intellectual humiliation festering into resentment. The footprints matching his boots deepened the suspicion, a misdirection tying poison to blade. Mr. Victor Lang concluded the round, his oiled hair impeccable, his shrewd eyes calculating probabilities like a ledger. "The partnership was fraught," he conceded silkily. "Forged documents, you say? Preposterous. The Colonel altered them himself to cheat me of shares in our Indian ventures. We argued, yes, but I retired to billiards." His mercenary psyche, avaricious and cunning, positioned gain as paramount. Yet an inconsistency arose. A servant glimpsed him near the safe, rifled post-mortem. As the interrogations waned, Poirot led Hastings and Japp to the Colonel's hidden safe, concealed behind a portrait of a stern ancestor. The lock, forced subtly, revealed emptied compartments, bonds and cash absent. "The money motive, it weaves through all," Poirot declared. "But who rifled it? The web tightens, mes amis, ensnaring the spider in its own threads." Afternoon brought a semblance of routine to the manor, but suspicion poisoned every interaction. Lady Evelyn took solitary walks along the Thames, her figure a silhouette of isolation. Forbes paced the billiard room, cue in hand, but unused. Voss buried herself in ledgers, her pen scratching accusations. Thorpe consulted medical texts, his gaze distant. Lang perused newspapers, his smile enigmatic. Poirot, retreating to the conservatory, pondered the mosaic. "The ghosts of accusation, Hastings, they haunt these halls. Red herrings abound, the poison trail, the bribed witness, the familial secret. Yet the psychological undercurrents, they converge. Timeline inconsistencies, physical traces, they point to a culprit overconfident in deception." As evening descended, the River Thames mirrored the darkening sky, its waters a repository of secrets. Within Meadowbank Manor, the enigma deepened. the spectre of the bloody corpse casting long shadows over the living. Chapter 4. The Veil of Deception. As the investigation at Meadowbank Manor entered its 4th day, an insidious tension permeated the estate like a miasma rising from the Thames's fog-shrouded banks. The grand house, once a symbol of unassailable aristocracy, now resembled a gilded prison, its inhabitants ensnared in a web of mutual distrust that grew ever more intricate with each passing hour. The gardens, bathed in the fitful light of an overcast sky, seemed to wilt under the weight of unspoken secrets, their topiaries twisted into grotesque parodies of their former symmetry. Servants tiptoed through the halls, their eyes averted, while the constabulary's presence, uniformed officers stationed at key points, served as a constant reminder that death's shadow lingered, unexorcised. Hercule Poirot, the indomitable Belgian whose little grey cells operated with the precision of a Swiss timepiece, had commandeered the morning room as his temporary sanctum. There, amid the chintz and watercolours, he paced with measured steps, his cane punctuating his thoughts like exclamation marks in a manuscript. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler, sat nearby, his brow furrowed in concentration as he reviewed notes. "Poirot," he ventured, "these alibis, they're crumbling like sandcastles at high tide. But the evidence, it's a jumble. The cufflink points to Forbes, the footprints to Thorpe, the torn fabric to Voss, and yet nothing coheres." Poirot halted, his green eyes gleaming with intellectual fire. "Ah, mon cher Hastings, that is the genius of the deception, the veil that obscures the truth. The killer, he or she, is cunning, planting clues like a gardener sowing weeds to choke the flowers. But observe, the blood-stained handkerchief discovered in Mr. Lang's valise, analysis by the laboratory reveals it to be theatrical blood, not human. A plant, no, designed to implicate the merchant, yet exonerating him upon scrutiny. Misdirection upon misdirection, the mark of a mind overconfident in its labyrinth. Inspector Japp, arriving with a sheaf of reports, slapped them onto the table with his customary vigour. "Poirot, you're right about the hanky. Fake stuff from a theatrical supplier. But we've got breakthroughs. The safe's contents, inventoried by the solicitors, show bonds worth thousands missing, and fingerprints on the dagger hilt. Smudged, but partial matches to, well, several suspects. Sloppy work, if you ask me." The day's interrogations commenced with renewed intensity, Poirot orchestrating them like a maestro conducting a symphony of revelations. The suspects, summoned to the library once more, entered with the wariness of actors reprising roles in a tragedy they wished to forget. Lady Evelyn Meadowbank glided in first, her black crepe gown a shroud of elegance, though her sapphire eyes betrayed a flicker of defiance. Poirot, seating her with Gallic courtesy, produced a delicate lace glove, stained faintly with ink, from his pocket. "Madame, this was found in the study wastebasket, concealed among crumpled papers. The ink matches that of the codicil to the will. You claimed ignorance of its revisions, yet your handwriting, elegant, sloping, appears in the margins, annotations of protest." Her composure wavered, her psychological facade cracking like fine porcelain under strain. I discovered the draft days ago," she admitted, her voice a whisper. "Archibald intended to leave me penniless, funneling everything to that wretched trust. We argued fiercely that night. He called me a spendthrift, but I left him alive." Her motive, financial desperation, loomed larger, yet a servant's sighting of her in the conservatory at the crucial hour provided a tenuous alibi, muddied by timeline discrepancies. Major Reginald Forbes followed, his rakish charm eroded by haggard lines, his scar a stark reminder of battles past. He slumped into the chair, lighting a cigarette with unsteady hands. "Dash it all, Poirot. I've been straight with you. The debts? Crippling, yes. But that cufflink, it's mine, all right. But I lost it weeks ago. Someone must have pinched it to frame me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Précisément, Major. And the bribe to the scullery maid? Your desperation. It paints a portrait of a man cornered, willing to manipulate evidence." Forbes's psyche, a vortex of compulsion and regret, unravelled further. Confessions tumbled forth of clandestine meetings with bookmakers, but an unexpected witness, a groom who saw him in the stables at 10:40, offered partial exoneration, a red herring dissolving into irrelevance. Miss Clara Voss entered with a defiant tilt to her chin, her golden curls framing a face pale with suppressed emotion. Her freckles stood out like constellations on a stormy sky, her hazel eyes flashing with resentment. "You've unearthed my family's shame," she said bitterly. "The Colonel's indiscretion with my mother, the child abandoned. Vengeance. It burned in me, yes. I confronted him that evening, demanded recompense for the ruin he wrought. He laughed, called it ancient history." Poirot presented the torn fabric scrap, matching it to her sleeve. "A struggle, mademoiselle. Fibres under the Colonel's nails suggest resistance." Her vengeful spirit, forged in the crucible of betrayal, provided a compelling motive, yet a ledger entry time-stamped at 11, witnessed by the housekeeper, cast doubt, a timeline inconsistency that Poirot filed away as potential manipulation. Dr. Julian Thorpe, his lean frame rigid with tension, adjusted his spectacles as he sat, his high forehead creased in thought. "The footprints to the shed. They are mine," he conceded coolly. "But I retrieved a medical bag earlier that evening before the storm. Poison. Irrelevant to a stabbing." Poirot leaned forward, his voice a scalpel. "Your grudge, Doctor. It festers. The misdiagnosis of the Colonel's son, blamed on you, costing your practice dearly. And the partial print on the dagger. Yours, perhaps, from handling it during a prior visit." Thorpe's clinical detachment cracked, revealing a psyche scarred by professional ignominy. A motive of retribution simmered, but a patient's affidavit confirming a house call at 10:30 provided an alibi, frayed by the reset clocks discovered in the hall. Mr. Victor Lang, last to appear, entered with the oily assurance of a man accustomed to negotiation. His shrewd eyes appraised the room, his smile a veneer over calculation. The safe rifled, convenient to pin on me, with our disputed shares, but I had no access. Poirot produced a forged document, shares transferred illicitly. "Your handiwork, monsieur. The Colonel's accusations, they threatened ruin." Lang's mercenary nature, avaricious and unyielding, emerged in full, admissions of sharp practices, but a billiard cue chalk mark on his cuff, corroborated by Forbes, anchored his alibi, intertwined and suspect. As the sessions concluded, tension crested like a wave upon the Thames's banks. Whispers escalated. Lady Evelyn secluded herself in her boudoir, weeping audibly. Forbes drowned suspicions in brandy. Voss shredded papers in fury. Thorpe paced the gardens, his gaze distant. Lang wired associates, his demeanour furtive. Poirot, Hastings and Japp convened in the conservatory, amid the orchid's exotic blooms. "The veil lifts, mes amis," Poirot declared. "Alibis crumble. Lady Evelyn's migraine falsified by a servant's sighting near the study. The clocks reset to confound timelines. A woman's delicate touch, perhaps. psychological depths reveal ambition, desperation, vengeance, humiliation, greed, all converge. A breakthrough materialized, a hidden compartment in the dagger's hilt containing a note, "Betrayer," in elegant script. The final thread, Poirot murmured. That evening, as shadows lengthened, Poirot summoned all to the drawing room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his posture commanding, "the hour of revelation draws nigh. Gather for the truth. It shall be unveiled." The chandeliers flickered like accusatory stars, the storm's echo in distant thunder a harbinger of climax. Meadowbank Manor held its breath, the bloody corpse's enigma poised for resolution. Chapter 5. The Triumph of the Grey Cells. In the opulent drawing room of Meadowbank Manor, where the crystal chandeliers cast a myriad of flickering shadows upon the assembled company, like the accusatory fingers of fate itself, the air was thick with an almost palpable anticipation. The year 1935 had seen many a storm rage across the English countryside, but none so tumultuous as the one that had engulfed this venerable estate in the wake of Colonel Archibald Meadowbank's brutal demise. Now, as evening descended once more, Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his diminutive figure commanding the space with an authority born not of physical stature, but of intellectual supremacy. His egg-shaped head was inclined slightly, his meticulously waxed moustache quivering with the thrill of revelation, and his cat-like green eyes surveyed the suspects with a piercing acuity that laid bare the secrets of their souls. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice a melodious Belgian cadence that resonated through the chamber, like the tolling of a bell summoning judgment. "We have navigated a labyrinth most intricate, a maze of deception where red herrings proliferated like weeds in an untended garden, and misdirections pointed hither and yon, like false signposts on a foggy moor. The bloody corpse of Colonel Meadowbank, stabbed with savage fury in his sanctum, spoke of passion unbridled. Yet beneath that veneer of rage lay a calculation cold and precise. But fear not, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. They have triumphed. Order and method have prevailed over chaos and cunning. The suspects, seated in a semicircle of high-backed chairs upholstered in faded damask, shifted uneasily under his gaze. Lady Evelyn Meadowbank, her porcelain features composed into a mask of stoic elegance, clutched her pearl necklace with white-knuckled fingers. Major Reginald Forbes, his rakish scar stark against his pallid skin, puffed nervously on a cigarette, his restless eyes darting about. Miss Clara Voss, her golden curls framing a face etched with resentment, twisted a handkerchief in her lap. Dr. Julian Thorpe, behind his wire-rimmed spectacles, maintained a clinical detachment that belied the tension in his lean frame. Mr. Victor Lang, his shrewd black eyes calculating odds, leaned back with feigned nonchalance. Captain Hastings and Inspector Japp flanked Poirot, the former with eager anticipation, the latter with gruff professionalism. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically upon the Persian rug, now cleansed of its crimson stains, but forever tainted in memory. Let us reconstruct, mes amis, the events of that fateful night. The Colonel retires to his study at 10 o'clock, the storm raging without like the turmoil within his household. The door locks behind him, key in his pocket, the French windows secure against the tempest. Yet, by midnight, he lies slain, multiple wounds from the antique Indian dagger, blood pooling in rivulets of accusation. How? Who? The timeline. It was our first enigma. The pocket watch stopped at 10:15, yet witnesses placed him alive later. A manipulation, The clocks in the hall reset by delicate hands to confound the sequence. He turned to the group, his eyes alighting upon each in turn. The physical evidence, footprints in the mud, leading to the poison shed, matching Dr. Thorpe's boots. A red herring most blatant, planted to suggest a subtler demise, yet irrelevant to the stabbing. The torn fabric scrap, silk from Miss Voss's sleeve, another plant, to evoke a struggle born of vengeance. The bloodied cufflink, monogrammed RF, Major Forbes, dropped deliberately to implicate the gambler. The handkerchief in Mr. Lang's valise, theatrical blood, a forgery to taint the merchant, and the safe rifled of bonds, pointing to greed, misdirections all, sown by a mind intimate with the household secrets. Lady Evelyn's voice, sharp as a stiletto, interjected. "This is preposterous, Monsieur Poirot. You weave fantasies from threads of coincidence." "Non, madame," Poirot replied gently, yet with steel beneath. "The psychological clues, they betray you. Your ambition, restrained yet fervent, chafed against the Colonel's parsimony. The codicil to the will, discovered by you, annotated in your hand, threatened destitution. You argued that night, not mildly as claimed, but fiercely. He accused you of extravagance, of draining the estate. In rage, you seized the dagger, a relic of his imperial glory, symbolic of the life you despised, and struck repeatedly, passion-masking calculation." She gasped, her sapphire eyes widening. "Lies. My migraine. I was abed." Poirot shook his head. "Your alibi, madame, shattered. The maid who brought your tisane. Bribed subtly, her testimony inconsistent. A servant glimpsed you near the study at 10:45, not in the conservatory as claimed. The reset clocks, your doing to obscure the time. The hidden note in the dagger's hilt, betrayer, in your elegant script. A final accusation against the man who betrayed your dreams of opulence." The room fell silent, save for the distant murmur of the Thames. Forbes exhaled smoke, his voice hoarse. "But the cufflink, mine." "Planted, Major," Poirot explained, "as was the fabric for Miss Voss, the footprints for Dr. Thorpe, the handkerchief for Mr. Lang. Lady Evelyn, intimate with all, accessed your belongings during the soirée. Her motive, not mere money, but liberation from a marriage grown oppressive. The Colonel's new will, favouring veterans over you, sealed his fate. Psychological undercurrents. Your composure cracked under grief, but it was guilt. Overconfidence in misdirection, your fatal flaw." Lady Evelyn rose, her poise fracturing like glass. He deserved it. Years of belittlement, of penny pinching while his fortunes dwindled. The will, it would have left me beggared. I entered through the secret passage, known only to family, struck in fury, then locked the door from within before slipping out. The clues, I planted them to scatter suspicion. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs at the ready. "Lady Meadowbank, you're under arrest for the murder of Colonel Archibald Meadowbank." As she was led away, her sobs echoing through the halls, a collective exhalation filled the room. Forbes stubbed out his cigarette, relief etching his features. "By God, Poirot, you've done it." Voss wiped her eyes, her resentment softening. "Justice at last, for my family too." Thorpe nodded gravely. "A tragic end to old wounds." Lang smiled, faintly. "The shares, mine now, legitimately." Poirot turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, another victory for the grey cells. Human nature, 'tis predictable in its unpredictability." In the days that followed, peace tentatively returned to Meadowbank Manor. The estate, under solicitor's oversight, transitioned to the trust, its gardens blooming anew as if shedding the pall of death. Servants resumed their duties with lighter hearts, the Thames flowing onward, indifferent to mortal follies. Poirot and Hastings departed by motorcar, the countryside unfolding in verdant splendour. A puzzle most satisfying, Poirot mused. The bloody corpse, it whispered its secrets, and we listened. Hastings chuckled. Your grey cells, Poirot, they never fail. As the manor receded in the distance, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light upon the river, a symbol of revelation after storm. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining this sojourn into the labyrinthine depths of mystery and the indomitable spirit of deduction. Until our next encounter with the incomparable Hercule Poirot, exercise your own little grey cells, and farewell.